The most embarrassing moment of my life happened when I was 8 years old. It started on a Tuesday night when the 10 boys of the Cub Scout den that I had just joined went bananas. They had just gotten forms to fill out for the Pinewood Derby. And I learned that you could order these kits that would then help you build model race cars. Every year, 1 million scouts, they take their homemade cars and run them down these ramps at an age when the three most exciting things in the world are harnessing gravity, a package under the Christmas tree that has air holes in it that's wiggling, and getting a package in the mail with your name on it. The kit arrived like pennies from heaven, and it was so simple. Inside was a block of wood, 4 nails, 4 black plastic wheels that looked like poker chips, 2 axles, and a sheet of instructions with an outline of a 1930s midget race car that you could trace on the block. And I thought I could make this happen if I just followed the directions. And voila, gravity would be my toy poodle. And of course, the carving was the hardest part, so I needed a divorced dad for help. So on our Sunday visit, he took me way out to a windy hill so he wouldn't have to clean up the shavings. And I brought a pocket knife that I'd found buried in a sandbox. And I thought it was the perfect tool because it had a Scout logo on the handle. However, it was covered in gray rust, and the last time it had an edge was probably the Eisenhower administration. And I still remember the look on my father's face as he struggled for hours. Late in the afternoon, he bought me a sheet of sandpaper, a quart can of fire engine red deck paint, and a brush, and the rest was up to me. And when I was done, I kind of had a car that looked like the drawing, the design. It was a little red toy car. The night of the Derby, I and my fellow den mates joined all the other dens in the pack at Stevenson Elementary just as the darkness was darkening the sky. Cue the ominous soundtrack. Because just inside, a line of folding tables with row after row of small race cars. And they were canted at a smart 45-degree angle like a carrier deck full of fighter planes. And I kept this paper bag with my car in it, clutched to my chest, as I looked and surveyed the battle group and realized that my dad and I had made a terrible, terrible mistake. We had followed the directions, not the other scouts or their fathers. I couldn't stop looking at the cars. They had Goodyear tires with spring suspension. They had metal flake paint with acrylic finishes and pinstriping, plastic windshields, driver figurines, instrument panels, front and rear Formula One air spoilers, and decals on the hoods, and not one of them looked like the car from a Monopoly game. I tucked my car in the back of one of the tables, and I snuck into the auditorium where the Scouts' fathers had assembled a giant ramp, maybe 20 lanes wide, maybe 30. This event was the perfect combination of construction and competition for boys that hadn't reached puberty yet and their fathers who couldn't care about it anymore. And so I sat there, quiet, just sitting there for a long time. Finally, they brought out cars and they started to put them in these starting gates. An announcer cued the ramps and the gates flew open and they ran heat after heat as these cars went down. And I realized that this was going to be a long night. There were so many cars. And eventually, I realized that the cars were coming to a place where I was going to see my car shortly. And there it was. And it was so red. as red as a cherry pie that you drop on a white tile floor, as red as a stoplight in a street full of winter snow, as red as a pimple on a polar bear's butt, and my heart was just as cold. I finally saw them put it in the starting gate in the middle of all these motionless cars, full of perfect potential energy. And then the gates flew up, the cars ran down, and they ran down the ramp and onto the flat, heading for the finish line, separating the different groups. It was actually glorious. There may have been other cars there that night. They were red, but they had chrome accents or Pennzoil decals, maybe even lightning bolts. But there was only one plain red Monopoly car there that night. And it stopped on the steepest part of the track. Right in the middle of the ramp. My crimson paperweight. Can you imagine the sound of 300 boys laughing? 300 times the laugh of the bully that kicked you in school that year you were there. Oh yeah. And there were shouts coming out. Oh, looks like he stopped for lunch. His dad made him glue the wheels on. First prize for last place. I snuck out of the auditorium, left the car. I didn't tell anybody it was mine. But I learned a valuable lesson that night. When it comes down to it, if going gets rough, get out of town. Because very soon after that, we moved, and I never went to another scout meeting again. I think paramilitary groups just weren't my thing. But the whole derby was supposed to bring scouts and their adults together, but that was the first year after my parents' divorce. And it wasn't until later, when I was 13, when I moved in with my dad, and he taught me how to make speeches. So now, when I get laughs, hopefully they're on purpose. Oh, wait, don't ask me to play a Monopoly game. It's too long. It promotes unbelievable gentrification in Atlantic City, which did not work out well for Trump. But mostly, I just can't stand watching that little car pass by.